All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host. Thank you all very, very much for tuning in. I deeply appreciate it. Let's see. What do we got? You know what? Let me just start with this. This is going to be the last podcast for 2024. So the UFC is not coming back until January 11th. And I don't have anything else to talk about on this. Let me caveat this. If something really crazy happens, I'll do a show. Otherwise, the 23rd, the 15th, wrong column on my calendar there. So yeah, 15th when I record it. So this is this episode. It's late. So the 22nd and the 29th. Unless something really crazy happens, we're going to be taking those off because one's a few days before Christmas, the other's a few days before New Year's, and there's nothing really to talk about. Again, if that changes, keep an eye out for a show, but if not, if all goes normally, then a couple of weeks off. We will be back on the 5th of January to preview the first UFC card of that year. More on that a little bit later. And that will also be, I think, the episode where I maybe go over some of the, do a little bit of a 2024 year in review, maybe, a little bit. We'll see. Do be on the lookout sometime over the next couple of weeks, again, before the next podcast. I should have written up and submitted my year-end column over at 411mania.com. So you can find that over there if you want to read it. It will include all the regular year-end awards. So I've got several of them more or less mapped out by now. I'm not gonna do it until I think there's like one more. There's a couple of other smaller shows between now and the end of the year that I want to let play out, see if anything really crazy kind of comes across that would be relevant. But I've got a bunch of them kind of mapped out. Like I know who's getting the worst luck in MMA award. I know who's getting breakout fighter of the year. I know who's getting fighter of the year. I know knockout of the year. I don't know fight of the year just yet. I know a lot of places have went, oh, Gaethje and Holloway, and you know what, guys? I no. Like I was hyped for that fight. I enjoyed that fight. The ending of that fight is legendary, and I don't use that word lightly. But that is the stuff of legend. But the fight itself, like if you actually watch the fight a second time, it's still a good fight, but there was so much like reaction and hype and emotion to the way that fight ended, deservedly so, that it kind of just indelibly impressed in our heads. Boy, that was a crazy ending to a crazy fight. The fight was not that crazy. Um, it might be on my list somewhere for that, but it is. I don't think it's the fight of the year. So I'm gonna have to go through my list of potentials and really kind of sort. So that one needs to get sorted out. Submission of the year really needs to get sorted out. Um, I know fighter. Again, I have breakout fighter of the year and fighter of the year kind of mapped out at this point. So unless something again kind of weird happens between now and then, that actually changed after this recent card. My list for breakout because Joaquin Buckley actually needs to be on that list. But we'll talk about that in a minute or two. So anyway, that's what's on the horizon. We're gonna have a couple of weeks off. We'll hit the ground running on January 5th, unless something really outlandish happens in the world of MMA between now and then, in which case I will do a shorter episode talking about whatever outlandish things happened. It'd have to be pretty big, though, for me not to just address it on the next episode. So, anyway, point there being, this will be the last episode for the year, so everyone knows that up front. Okay, so on the agenda this evening, a review of UFC on ESPN 63, the last UFC event of 2024. You know what? Pretty solid event when it's all said and done. Not everything was great. I'm certainly not going to pretend that it was. But there was definitely some quality stuff to be had on this one. So, yeah, we'll get into that. And what I have for a couple of bits of news. Not much. The biggest news item of the week was Ilya Topuria making some noise about moving up to lightweight, maybe, but there's still a little bit of ambiguity. So we'll talk about that, and again, maybe a couple of other things. We'll see how it plays out between now and when the recording is done, when I get to that part of it. So, any way you can interact with the product is always appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, whatever is applicable to your podcast platform of choice. I always appreciate all of that. All right, longer intro than usual because we had some housekeeping to take care of, but let's get into this, shall we? So UFC on ESPN 63. How did we do prediction-wise? I changed my pick on only one of these. It was actually the first fight of the night. It was Rodriguez and Josephine Knudsen. I vacillated on that one a lot. Not a lot when I picked it. It's the first fight on the card. You know, I very rarely vacillate heavily on those. But the closer we got to the fight night, the more I went, I don't think. So that one I swapped. Only one I did. Brought me to, ultimately that means I went 10-3. So what did I miss? I missed the co-main. That one bothers me. Because in my preview of that, you could hear me going, Cub Swanson's got a real shot at this one. So that one, probably should have got that one. I did not get Vitor Petrino and Dustin Jacoby. Another one I made. Here's the thing about that one. Maybe I should have, but Jacoby had been on such a weird skid, and I rated that heavier than ultimately Vitor Petrino getting tapped out by Anthony Smith earlier this year, and I should have inverted those. But I don't think it was wrong for me to pick the way I did. Then I got wrong Marcos and Yanez. Live, I scored that for Yanez, but I'm not sure how sold I am on that. 29-28 either way, I think is fine. The 30-27 that was there for Marcos, yeah, iffy. But, the rest of it, I got. I mean, frankly, the rest of it wasn't really all that hard to predict. I say that, respectfully. But I think most of the rest of those were favorites. Rodriguez wasn't. Grant, I think, ultimately did close as the favorite, or that was a pick'em. Maverick was a big favorite. Lima was a favorite. Woodson was the favorite. Alvarez, I believe, was the favorite. Johnson was the favorite. Sterling was a big favorite. Yanez was an underdog, and I picked him. Jacoby was a dog, too. Okay, anyway. Point being, so was Swanson, actually. No, Swanson was a dog. Point being, 10-3 for the event. That means I closed the year predicting UFC fights, every fight on every card, with a record of 360 and 150, with 4 no contests. So I am a little better than 2-1. Hang on, I'm just again a little better because 180 it would have been half, would have been exactly 2-1. So I'm 30 off of... I should have done this math earlier. Let's see. So I'll just do 360 divided by 150, and that will give me... 2.4. Yeah, so not quite 2.5 to 1. I said the whole year when I started this, I wanted to be better than 50-50. That was my primary goal. And I am definitively better than 50-50. So, ultimately, let me make a note of this. $2.4 to 1. And you know what? I can live with 2.4 to 1. So that's where we were for 2024. Only went negative on 2 cards. That was UFC on ESPN plus 97 and UFC on ESPN 58. UFC on ESPN 58 was only by 1. There was a few on UFC on ESPN plus 97. That was not a very good card for my. I don't know what happened there, but that was not a good one for me. I had a couple of events that were only 1-lossers. Let's have a look at that actually real fast. Okay. So UFC on ABC 7, UFC on ESPN 62. Were the times I only had one, I was 1 off of a perfect card. Well, I don't think a perfect card in MMA is almost an unreasonable expectation for predictions because there's just so much randomness. But yeah, that's where we are. I mentioned last week I will be doing this again next year, keeping track of this just because I found this to be a useful exercise. And I kind of had a good time keeping track of this stuff. So I will be doing that again next year. And yeah, that'll be fun. I enjoyed this. I hope you all did too, listening along. I mean, if you just skip ahead from all this stuff, I can't stop you, but I hope you enjoyed it. All right. So on to the fights themselves. Main event. Let's get into this. Joaquin Buckley defeats Colby Covington via doctor stoppage due to a cut on his right eyelid. 4:42 of the 3rd round. This was not going Covington's way anyway. He was losing this. I shouldn't say complete. He wasn't getting like blown out of the water. He was, however, definitively losing. He had a kind of a rough first round. Buckley's takedown defense. It's not ironclad, but it's really good against the kind of wrestling that Covington brings. Because Covington, a lot of his entries are really low and just kind of trying to make contact, but trying to make contact on a guy with really good hips is just going to get your head driven into the mat, which is kind of what happened to Covington. And on the feet, Buckley just faster hands, better power, more dynamic, everything more going his way. Second round still goes to Buckley, but Covington has a little bit more success. He's able to finally get a little bit of like prolonged wrestling exchanges, a bit more in the second, and gets a little bit of top control time. There was a bit in the first though where he kind of like pulled half guard near the end, and that was dicey for a minute or two. It was near the end of the round, kind of, so it wasn't like that. It was a minute or two is an exaggeration, but someone as powerful as Buckley on top of you, man, that's a recipe for disaster. And the cut on his eye had been getting worse, and he kept wiping it Okay, just minor tip for anyone out there if you happen to find yourself in this position. A lot of what the cut men do for cuts like that to get them to stop bleeding is apply stuff to it. Sometimes it's a coagulant, sometimes, frequently it'll be like adrenaline, because that's a vasodilator. Um, and that stuff needs to kind of, and then you put Vaseline over the top of it, but that stuff needs to sit there to work. If you start touching it, you're going to wipe away all the stuff that's going to stop it bleeding. Now, cuts in MMA are always bad to begin with because there's so many ways to exacerbate them. Legal ways. I mean, if you watch a lot of older wrestlers or wrestlers in like older MMA fights, UFC, Pride, whatever, you'll see them just like dig their fingers into cuts. Now that's against the rules, but you know what you can do legally? If you got someone with a cut, you can clinch and you can put your head against it and you can grind that. Or you can put a forearm on it or a palm on it in a close quarter scenario and you can kind of grind that back. Like there's legal ways to mess with this stuff that makes getting cut in MMA really it puts you really behind an eight ball unless you're exceptionally good at maintaining distance. And even then, that's again a little bit iffy. And by the time the fourth round rolled around, or excuse me, the third, the doctor said like between rounds 2 and 3, like we can't let this get much worse. And then it got worse, and there was a sequence. Covington actually got on top. He was able to slip. Buckley got his back briefly, but struggled to really get hooks in. So Covington kind of broke one of those, got him off balance, got on top. When they wrestled back up to their feet, the referee like hold it, let the doc check on that cut because it had gotten worse. And the doctor looked at it and said, "No, if this gets too much worse, he's gonna like lose the eyelid." So they waved it off. Dana White wasn't thrilled with that. He did Nevada, that would have been, they wouldn't have stopped it. Well, buddy, Nevada still employs Adelaide Byrd. All right. I'm not saying Nevada's the worst athletic commission in the world, but they are not the best. They also let Irene Aldana go out there with a cyclops hole, with a cut on her forehead that looked like she'd been hit by an axe. That was dangerously close to connecting with a cut across like the bridge of her nose, and yeah, that's not a flex. I am perfectly fine with this kind of cut that Covington had, as bad as it was in the location that it was, being a fight stopper. I am 1,000,000% okay with that. And frankly, I think this should kind of be more the standard than some of the weirdness we're used to in Emery. I mean, look, especially under the eye. This was not just like under the eyebrow, like barely. It was like on the eyelid. It was really in a bad spot. So I'm okay with this one being stopped when it was, in all seriousness. So Buckley, I mentioned this before, man. I had to reevaluate my breakout star for 2024 because Buckley went 4-0 this year, which is a rarity. Like you don't see guys in the modern landscape tending to get 4 fights a year. But he got 4 of them, 3 of them stoppages. Um, yeah, he put in a really quality year coming into this one. So coming out of this one at least. So yeah, good for him. After the fight, he also did the I'm going to play with the crowd a little bit. Y'all get to help me pick my next opponent. And for a guy who started the year with one of the worst call-outs ever, calling out Conor McGregor, and he got kind of lampooned for it, and to my mind, deservedly so. He actually got better the next time he got to call somebody out. He called out Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru Usman did the no, he doesn't deserve a fight with me, buddy. Look, Kamaru Usman is the second best welterweight the UFC's had. He's only behind George St. Pierre. And I give him that respect because that is a heck of a thing to do. He had a long run. He had a really good run. But my man hasn't won a fight since 2021. And that win was a decision over Colby Covington that I frankly scored for Covington. Your 3-fight losing streak gets you. You don't get to do the what have you done to earn my attention? No, no, no. You ain't that guy at this point, man. You are not in that your career is not in that position. And everybody kind of, appropriately mocked Usman for his take on that. But so after this one, Buckley did okay, I'm going to give 3 names, and depending on who gets the biggest pop, that's who I'm going to start kind of lobbying for. So he said Leon Edwards, and there was no real reaction. And he said, okay, Kamaru Usman, and there was a moderate reaction. And he said, how about Bilal Muhammad, and there was a less moderate reaction. So, look, the Usman fight actually makes sense for Buckley, and I absolutely mean that. I think it's a wise call out for him. I think he was never going to jump the line to get the next title shot. That was just not going to happen here. But he's close, and either Edwards or Usman gets him closer, assuming either of those fights can actually materialize. As for Covington, look, I know Colby Covington is a deeply unpopular personality in the MMA media space. And I understand why. And I've tried to be fair to the guy. He's said some really heinous things just in the name of sort of desperately trying to get shock attention. And I don't have a lot of time for that. It's why I don't talk about it, really, as a general rule. Not just with him, with anyone. But there's been because of how some of his career was managed, there's been a bit of unfair revisionism around him. And I want to take just a second here to point out something. Look, one, I did think he beat Kamaru Usman in their second fight. That's how I scored it. Maybe you can disagree with me. Fine. I'm not here to fight you over that. But I did score that one for him from where I was sitting. Colby Covington was ahead of the curve on a couple of things, mostly related to pressure, fence wrestling, and utilizing what I think kind of gets called the Khabib meta. At least that's what I've called it. Apparently there's a MMA coach who refers to a lot of the fence wrestling as walwaza, which is a play on the judo term for grappling, which is newaza. Because newaza is the ground grappling portion of judo. Anytime you see him on the ground working, it's newaza. I forget what the name is for standing. It's another waza. I forget what it is when you're standing in judo. But they have the different terms for them. Because the rules around newaza for competition have to be a little bit different than other things, so they can still be distinct from jiu-jitsu for reasons. That's a whole other thing. But as an MMA coach, you call it walwaza when you're wrestling against the fence. And I think it does need to be understood as its own thing. And Colby Covington was a little bit ahead of the game there. A lot of modern MMA is about pressure. That's a thing that's really developed over the last 5-ish years. The whole sport, I think it's only really been apparent with hindsight. Because for a long time, guys, George St. Pierre was a very reactive fighter. I don't mean that, and that sounds weird. I don't mean that he wasn't proactive in the sense that he wasn't doing things. I mean, a lot of what George's game was designed to do was pick at you until you got sick of what he was doing. You overcommit, he counters. So he was about inducing an action and having a reaction ready to go. Anderson Silva was a brilliant counter fighter. And those two guys did a lot of heavy lifting for what is excellence in MMA and what does it look like for a long time. So a lot of guys kind of tried to emulate that. I mean, Israel Adesanya is more of a counter striker. So this is I'm not just reaching back into, the something really the far-flung past, but more of the past to pull some of this out. Um, but really, over the last like 5 or 6 years, you've kind of seen that shift to the pressure-based fighting styles and fighting philosophies really coming to the fore in MMA. I mean, I don't mean that there are no good counter fighters anymore. That would be a wild overstatement. But take a minute and just let's think for half a second here, right? Whoever you think the best heavyweight in the world is, whether you think it's John Jones or Tom Aspinall, Tom Aspinall is a pressure fighter. He likes to be the one instigating. He likes to be the one applying pace and pressure. John, not quite as much, but John at heavyweight is still like a quick fight with Cyril Gane and then the ghost of Stipe Miocic. So we got more answers. We got a few more answers out of the Stipe fight, but I don't know. But look at the guys at heavyweight who are actually kind of in the ascendancy. How did a big part of Alexander Volkov fixing some of his career trajectory was just, okay, we're going to be on the front foot. I'm going to do a lot more stabbing with front kicks to disrupt my opponents, but I'm going to try to make things happen. The proactivity quota has gone up. Alex Pereira at light heavyweight, or when he was briefly middleweight champion. That dude is pressure and forcing action. Dricus du Plessis. Uh, I'm actually even going to throw Sean Strickland into this mix, believe it or not, because watch a Sean Strickland fight, and one of the things he does really, really well, in addition to his defense, is it's not that he never backs up, but the vast majority of the time he goes forward. He is the one trying to instigate. He is the one trying to apply pressure. And actually, that's kind of why he and du Plessis bounce off each other in some weird ways. Because they both kind of do that. I mean, it's not that, once again, will you watch a DDP fight and never see him back up in circle? Sure you will. Sure you will. Of course it happens. There's a rhythm to these things. But in general, like, he likes to be the one going forward, and he likes a more action-oriented style. He likes things. He thrives in a fight where a lot of things happen. Other fighters thrive in situations where a lot of things don't happen. Welterweight, Usman did a lot more pressuring. A lot more. Edwards, a little bit more iffy, but Edwards didn't have much of a reign. And Bilal Muhammad rose through the ranks once he started just going forward a lot more. Lightweight, Islam Makhachev tailors a bit more of his game to what his opponent is doing. Like if he's facing a guy who is primarily offensive like Charles Oliveira, the previous champion, who is all action and all pressure, by the way, he's able to absorb pressure a little bit better, but even then, it's not like he actively disengages. Volkanovski, because Topuria is, yes, he's a lot of what I'm describing here. Volkanovski was not always about forward pressure, but he was about a lot of suppressing whatever his opponent was doing in general and making the activity occur on his terms. And that is a unique kind of pressure in some respects. So him maybe a little bit, not quite as much as the others. He was a lot more patient in a lot of respects too. Bantamweight's had some ups and downs on this one. But Jan in general likes to be a bit more action-oriented. Aljamain Sterling really can't win off the back foot. And once he started being a bit more proactive about a lot of that stuff, that's when things started going his way. Sean O'Malley, a bit more of a counter fighter. But, I mean, Merab, current champion, like, that dude is all, for the most part, like, he can't fight backing up. I mean, okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but watching him when he is in circling and defensive mode is versus when he is going forward is night and day difference. And Pantoja, yeah, Pantoja's all pressure too, by and large. So that over the last again like 5-ish years has really become the winning strategy applied broadly. And Covington was a little bit ahead of the curve on that, so he got out in front of a lot of guys who did a little bit more counter work or a little bit more, tried to be a bit more patient. And he had a good pace, had a good understanding of the wrestling, had a good understanding of getting to moderate control positions and being able to win large sections of rounds from there. And now in some ways that's a kind of narrow element to MMA. Like Colby Covington is hardly an elite striker in technique or power. He's not much of a submission threat, but he was ahead of the curve in a couple of ways. It let him beat some really, again, there's a bit of like, oh no, he only beat Old Man Lawler and these other guys when they were just really on the decline. Robbie Lawler was not that far removed from being, near like champion or very near the title. He wasn't completely washed. He was not at the best. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that was the best version of Robbie Lawler, but pretending that that was some very washed up version, I think, is disingenuous to Lawler. But so point being, I'm going to give Colby Covington some as fair an assessment as I can in that respect. We're at a point, though, where I think most of the game is caught up to or surpassed him. He's dealt with some injuries and some layoffs that have hampered his physical development. Him getting thrown out of American Top Team did him no favors. I'm not trying to insult the team he wound up with. I think MMA Masters is actually a good camp. I don't think they're a bad one, but I think the best version of Colby came out of American Top Team. I understand why he got the boot. If I was Dan Lambert, I might have made the same call. I probably would have, but again, I'm not Dan Lambert, so there's a lot of minutia there that I'm not privy to. But, and there's also a little bit of, wait, why did he get that title shot against Leon Edwards? And yeah, that's a really questionable bit of matchmaking from the UFC's part. I couldn't defend that at the time, and I'm not going to in hindsight. That was weird. Weird to bad. But I'm not going to pretend that Colby Covington was some, bum. Because I dislike his persona. I'm just not going to do that. But I don't know where he goes from here. He's got the excuse that the doctor stopped it. Fine, you can lean into that if you feel so inclined. I can't stop you. But he's not had a really good performance in a while. Taking this fight on short notice, that was a weird one to me. I don't know what his risk calculation was going on there. There's probably some factors I'm not aware of that led to him doing it, but I don't know. So Buckley, yeah, any of the three guys that were mentioned, I think would all be fine. And yeah, Buckley's actually set up pretty good in 2025 to make a run towards the belt, believe it or not. Co-main event. This was your fight of the night. This was a gift. This was a gem of a little fight. Cub Swanson and Billy Quarantillo beat the crap out of each other until Cub Swanson finally knocked Billy Q out at 136 of the third round. Go watch this fight if you didn't see it live. Thank me later. This was fun. Quarantillo trying to keep his pace going. He could not get out of the way of Cub Swanson's right hand for a really long time. And Swanson doesn't mind throwing the right hand lead, even off of orthodox stance, the power hand first. But Swanson slowed a little bit in the second. The body work from Quarantillo started getting to him. Some of the grappling a little bit kind of fatigued him. He kept fighting though and kept swinging. And finally, in the third round, hits a right hand. Quarantillo doesn't react all that well, so he follows up with a left hook, right hand left hook or left hook right hand. I forget which one it was, but might have been just the old 3-2 or 1-2, depending on how you want to qualify what he did with his lead hand. Finally, Quarantillo goes down unconscious. Cub Swanson has been doing this for 20 years. His professional debut was 2004. I watched this guy in the WEC. I actually remember when Jose Aldo stopped him in what should have been like 3 seconds with a flying double knee attack. Watching him has been kind of a joy because he's very rarely in boring fights, usually interesting, and just an old warhorse. So he said that this might be his last one. If it is, you couldn't script a better ending. You could not write this better. He gets a high-profile fight. It's a co-main event. He gets a willing opponent in front of an audience. That's not always been a given these last, couple of years, has it? In front of an audience that is there for the whole fight. It is a blood and guts war, and he comes out on top with a knockout in the third round. They don't get much better than that. So if he does choose to hang him up, he's 41. Again, he's been doing this forever. This is about as storybook an ending as you can get. Of course, nobody likes to go out on the storybook ending because if you can still do it, you still think you want to do it. And I'll also say, as a note, if he's going to be in, if you keep matching him up with this kind of opposition, another fight or two is not necessarily something I would complain about. You got to give him the Jim Miller treatment. I love Jim Miller, and bless him, he has accepted his spot on the roster at this point. He knows he's not making a run for the belt. He knows the end is coming up, so they find appropriate fights for him. If Swanson wants another couple that are in, that kind of vein, okay, I could see it. But if you do want to hang him up, buddy, this was like movie perfect. Really good fight. Look it up. This is probably going somewhere on my fight of the year list. Just in as a. Did I make sure to include that? And I did. Okay. Just had to double check my list. So maybe a little bit of recency bias here, but that's probably going somewhere on my list of fight of the year. Speaking of really good performances, at flyweight, Manel Kape beat up Bruno Silva. I mean, Manel Kape got kicked in the groin 3 times. I mean, the ref did take a point by the end of it, but the final kick the body kick that Kape landed that kind of got the finish going in the third round. Kape wins again 157 to the third. Kind of hit the groin of Silva, and the referee, I think it was Keith Peterson, who looks like he's been on Ozempic and his brain's kind of fried. And the referee kind of seemed to go, you know what? You kicked him in the groin 3 times. I'm going to let him get away with this one. Which is a really bad way to adjudicate the rules of combat. I'm just saying that not the biggest fan of a lot of the reffing on this night, just for the record. But this was the best Manel Kape has looked in the UFC. He came out and he was in the zone from the get-go. Really fast hands, good combination work, sharp kicks. Just really great. After the fight, said he wants to fight for the belt. Here's the thing about the flyweight belt. You're kind of struggling to find top contenders that Alexandre Pantoja hasn't already beaten. Believe it or not, Pantoja does have a win over Manel Kopp. Kopp's UFC debut was against Pantoja, which is a heck of a guy to get thrown to the wolves to. Um, but by this point, I would be okay with the rematch, for the record. Um, you've got Kai Kara France hanging out there as well. Here was the interesting thing over the last week or so. Davison Figueiredo, after losing at bantamweight to Petr Yan, indicated he thinks he can make 125 again and would like to fight Pantoja for the belt. Now, Davison Figueiredo owns a win over Alexandre Pantoja. That was a rough fight for Pantoja, believe it or not. Not that Pantoja didn't have moments, but Figueiredo's power and body work and just kind of, this was Figueiredo's rise to the top. And he was a marauder, just a punishing bruiser to fight. And he did a number on Pantoja, won that fight, and Figueiredo won that fight fair and square. If that's actually on the table, then Pantoja Figueiredo again, a rematch for the belt. I think you do Kopp and Kara France for the number one contendership. Maybe on the same card, so you've got a backup in case something happens to the main event. But that's if Figueiredo is actually in play. Who knows? The UFC indicated that Dana White actually said, Kopp's not getting a title shot off of this, but we'll get together, we'll figure out something to get for him. So, really good performance from Kopp. Thumbs up on that one. Light heavyweight Dustin Jacoby knocked out Vitor Petrino, 344 the third. This fight sucked until the finish. And this was almost a carbon copy of the knockout that Kamaru Usman hit on Jorge Masvidal. Didn't quite do the rear hand parry. Because Usman got deep and hand fought away the backhand of Masvidal. Masvidal was throwing a left hook, and the right straight from Usman just got there faster, because it usually does. Same kind of thing here, but Jacoby didn't get all the way to parrying the backhand, but just got inside of a looping lead punch, and just unconscious. Good knockout. Fight was not good. Bantamweight Daniel Marcos defeated Adrian Yanez via split decision. There was two 29-28s, one each way, and then a 30-27 for Marcos that I can't quite get to giving Marcos the second. 1-3 for Marcos, I think is fine. I gave Yanez 2-3 live. But third round, super close. This was a good little fight. There was some really nice technique on display here from both guys. Give this a watch if you're a fan of this kind of fighting. Both guys were able to land some pretty good shots. Yanez has good hands, but he is not great about moving his head when he's throwing punches. And that kind of started to bite him a little bit here. Especially Marcos constantly was like ducking and then throwing the right hand. Yanez showed a few knees. That kind of stopped that. Then Yanez started closing some of his combination with a left hook that was landing. Marcos adjusted. He adjusted by throwing a little bit more of the weaving in, because he got a better read on when Yanez was going to show the knees or something, and so then he could weave under the left hook, get a counter off. Good stuff from both guys here. Marcos is legitimate. I vacillated a little bit on this pick going in. I stuck with Yanez, but not quite sure what the wall is he's hit, but he has definitely hit one and needs to find a way over it. So, pretty good win for Marcos. Kicking off the main card, Navajo Sterling defeated Tuco Tokos via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. This fight sucked. Not much else to it. Okay, lightweight Michael Johnson knocked out Atman Azaitar, 2-3 of the second. Nice right hook from Michael Johnson. Azaitar came into the UFC and actually got a little bit of momentum, won his first couple of fights. Then had that weird thing where he and his team broke COVID protocols when they were in the Middle East, and there was some suspicion that he was involved in like moving something because there were bags involved, and there was a whole mess. So the UFC cut him and then changed their minds a little bit later for reasons. But since then, he's 0-3. So I don't know. Really nice knockout from Johnson. A couple of unnecessary coffin nails to follow up, but yeah, those are the risks you take. Lightweight, Joel Alvarez knocks out Drakkar Klose 248 of the first. What a lovely performance from Joel Alvarez. That man he's finished all of his opponents, or all of his wins. He's got one loss that was a decision, and then he got stopped by Arman Tsarukyan. So the UFC commentary team saying that he's only lost to Arman Tsarukyan. No, he also lost to Demiris Magulov. The only guy currently on the UFC roster that beat him was Tsarukyan, but he has 2 losses, not just one. Like, we can all see his record. I beg of you, do better. Commentary. That he was just able to land. He got Drakkar Klose backing up early, landed on him. He's a big guy. I mean, he was like, it was a pretty serious height and reach disparity. He was like, what, 6 inches taller with 7 inches of reach advantage or something like that? Just big. Got him backing up, started hitting him at distance, got him off balance with a left hook, caught him with a jumping knee, then his left arm gets under the neck like he's going to do a guillotine choke, but he just presses close into the fence, and while he's got the left arm again kind of under the neck, his right hand, he just punches him in the head repeatedly. Then tells the ref, like, hey, he's out, by the way. Really nice finish. Joel Alvarez, this fight should have been on the main card. Easily should have been on the main card. Alvarez pretty well set up for next year. Featherweight, man, I think I heard Jack Slack liken this to a body horror film. So at featherweight, Sean Woodson and Fernando Padilla. So Fernando Padilla is like 6'1". And Sean Woodson is like 6'2", what is he, like 6'3", 6'3 and a half? He's taller than I am. Hang on, where is this? Oh, I think he's 6'2 and a half. He's listed as 6'2". I actually do think they adjusted that recently. So these two guys, again, they're actually both taller than I am. Or Padilla's about my height. Because I'm like 6'1". Making 145, I'd have to cut off a limb to make 145. I mean, look, I'm in better shape than I used to be, but I'm still like, what, 215? I think I tend to do like 218 plus or minus 5, give or take. Which, look, I used to be like 240 when I got down consistently to that. When I got to, like, again, 218 plus or minus 5. I think it was 3 for a while, actually. It was 218 plus or minus 3 on any given day. When I held that for about a week, I was good. That's about what I wanted. And at that point in time, if I want to get into much better shape now, then, you know, that first 20 can be kind of easy. Well, the first 12 is actually pretty easy depending on your lifestyle. Just doing anything, working out like 2 or 3 times a week for an hour will get that first like 10 to 12 off fairly easily. Minor diet change will kind of get some of the other stuff off. So once I got that under control, I stopped looking at my weight because I'm in a good place with it, so I don't care what the number on the scale is. I feel good. And if I want to feel better or hash something else out with my body, then yeah, that's going to take more time. But that's still a lot of, like, even at my lowest, and let's just say hypothetically I'm like 215. Like, that's still a lot of weight to cut to get down to 145 for me. And yeah, I don't know how these guys do it. So these two really tall, long-limbed, skinny-limbed guys. But Sean Woodson is pretty good. Was able to box up Padilla, got him out of there. Again, 458 of the first. Woodson after the fight, I think one of the post-fight pressers was kind of asked, like, you're on a pretty good winning streak, and he is. Like, why haven't you, kind of made a legitimate run? And I think by his own admission, he said, I don't talk a whole lot, and this was my first finish in a while, so of course, I'm kind of going to get lost in the shuffle. And you know what? Props for the self-awareness. Uh, Not just awareness. That may be that may be underselling his abilities, but the self-assessment I think is accurate. So, you know what? A sober self-assessment, kind of rare in the combat sports world, so hats off to him. Okay, good win for Sean Woodson. At featherweight, Felipe Lima defeated Miles Johns for unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Johns just really struggled to get anything going here. At women's flyweight, Miranda Maverick defeated Jamie Lynn Horth for unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Nothing really interesting or special here. At bantamweight, Davey Grant defeated Ramon Tavares for unanimous decision, 230-27 and a 29-28. Davey Grant fights like once a year, give or take, but man, is he fun. Um, he's just another guy who's just, when he gets in the cage, he's pretty active. It's not that Tavares didn't have some moments of success. He was able to land on occasion, but I think in every round, Grant was like landing 3 times as many strikes, just doing more constantly. Yeah, David Grant's he's good fun, man. He choked out Rafael Assunção with that inverted triangle choke. Like you're hard pressed to find a bad Davy Grant fight. They're not. I mentioned he's taken big bouts of time off. I mean, technically he was in a season of The Ultimate Fighter finale. He was 18. So in 2013, he loses to Chris Holdsworth in what is technically his UFC debut. We don't see him again until he beats Marlon Vera in 2016. So then he fights twice in 16, so February and October. Doesn't fight in 17, fights in July of 18, loses. Then fights in November of 19, wins. Fights July of 2020, wins. March of 21, wins. June of 21, loses. November of 21, loses. Split decision to Adrian Yanez in that November 2021 fight. That was I scored that for Yanez, but you could have scored that for Grant. Then fights once in 22, beats Louis Smolka, knocks him out. Then fights twice in 23. The aforementioned inverted triangle choke of Assunção. Loses a split decision to Daniel Marcos. I think I agreed with the scoring for Marcos, but it's another one that I don't think scoring for Grant is wrong. And then this one, so that was July of 23 with the Marcos fight, so another like year plus off. But none of those are like bad fights. And kicking everything off, Piero Rodriguez defeated Josephine Knutson via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Rodriguez came out and just punched Knutson in the face, and it kind of rattled her a little bit. Then Rodriguez, a little bit more aggression, was able to get some takedowns, work her top game. Just a fairly comprehensive overall performance. And yeah, that was it. That was UFC on ESPN 63. So my full report, as always, is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. Your bonuses, I already mentioned, fight of the night was Swanson and Quarantillo. 0 issues with that. My secondary one would have been... Hang on, I think I already mentioned it. It would have been Marcos and Yanez. Would have been my second choice for that. Your performances of the night, one went to Dustin Jacoby, the other to Michael Johnson. Again, you were kind of spoiled for choice here. I have no problems with that. You could have given those 2 bonuses to any of the finishes. You could have given one to Cub Swanson. Just saying, you could have. You could have given one to Kopp. You could have given one to Alvarez. I might be more inclined to give one of those to Joel Alvarez personally, but that's just me. So yeah, again, great number of choices there. Really, and just kind of a fun all-around card to close out the year on. So, uh, yeah, good times were had by all, at least all the viewers, I believe. So that's where that is. All right. So let's jump into a little bit of the news here. Ilya Topuria made some noise by indicating he will probably be moving up to lightweight. I don't know if I like that. I mean, here's the thing. Am I going to complain about, hypothetically, Ilya Topuria versus Charles Oliveira kind of fight? I'm not going to complain about that one iota. I appreciate that Topuria isn't doing the I want to fight for the belt right away routine. That's actually refreshing. And honestly, if we're just talking like skill for skill, pound for pound, Islam Makhachev versus Ilya Topuria is one of the better fights that can be made. I don't like what it would leave at featherweight, personally. It would leave a really awkward situation. Um, because you've got Diego Lopez, you've got Movsar Evloev, you've got you got Volkanovski still in the division, and definitely still has to be considered a player in the title picture. Now, part of the reason that Topuria indicated was the weight cut to featherweight is pretty big for him, and his coach even chimed in like, yeah, he hates it every time. Every time he does it, he swears it's the last one. He apparently walks around 190 pounds. And in fact, I talked a little bit about this with Mark the other day, on one of our podcasts. He mentioned at one point he had lost a lot of weight and got down to like 190-ish. And said, I want to be at the point where I could cut down to, I think he said cut down to 170 or cut down to 155. And I had to look at him and go, the current featherweight champion of the UFC walks at 190, right? Like that's where weight cutting is these days. Um, that said, like if he does walk around 190 pounds, which wouldn't surprise me for the record, a cut of that magnitude is not sustainable in the long term. Like that's eventually going to take a pretty serious toll on your body. So if that's a primary consideration, I understand it. I still don't have to like it, and I kind of don't. I'd rather featherweight get sorted. Dude, he knocked out Max Holloway and he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway back-to-back fights. He beat the previous two best that division had. He beat the previous two best in that division. And now he's looking at like vacating and moving up. So I'm sure there's going to be discussions, amongst the UFC brass and whatnot about figuring this thing out. But I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on. If the weight cut for him is in fact that extreme, I do expect him to move up probably sooner rather than later, but I don't know if it'll be the next fight. So we will definitely be keeping an eye on that one in no small part because Topuria is kind of awesome, and what he does next is interesting to me. All right, let's see. Okay, let's do this. To close out this one, let's take a quick look at the first four or so events of 2025 because they've kind of sorted these out, and just want to take a quick look, right? So the January 11th card, they're at the Apex. These are warehouse fights. This card is dreadful. I looked at this briefly, I think last week. I've looked at it again. There's nothing here. Like it's just not. There's almost nothing here. So Santiago Ponzinibbio's fighting. That's usually okay. Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov is a good fight. But that's it. I mean, the vast majority of the fighters on this card don't have Wikipedia entries. If I was going to pick something else out here, maybe Nurullo Aliyev and Yanal Ashmuz. Um, yeah, that's kind of it. This is a dreadful card. We're going to preview it in a few weeks in full, but it's not good. But then we get UFC 311, and 311 is actually good. We have kind of the bout order finalized all the way up and down. So main card, Islam Makhachev, Arman Saryukian, yes please. Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov, no issues there. Benil Dariush and Hanato Moicano, that has insanity written all over it. Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill, I'm not mad at it, much as I, dunk on light heavyweight as being kind of a dumpster fire. Those are two guys. Winner probably, Yuri probably wouldn't get a title shot. He's been knocked out by Pereira twice, but a win for Hill would certainly get him a rematch, I think, at this point. And then kicking everything off on kicking the main card off is Kevin Holland and Rainier de Ritter. Like, yeah, I'm down with all of that. Peyton Talbot and Hani Barcelos on the prelims. That's a good card. Rinya Nakamura fighting Muin Gafurov is actually pretty solid. Tiger Ulanbekov and Clayton Carpenter kicking everything off. That should probably be higher on the card, but I would swap that with there's a middleweight fight on the middle portion of the prelims. Zachary Reese and Cedricus Dumas. Let those guys curtain jerk. We're trying to build flyweight here a little bit, people. So 311, big thumbs up, especially after the other one that is yeesh. Then on February 1st, we have in Abu Dhabi a fight night. So a lot of the usual suspects here. Main event: Israel Adesanya and Nasruddin Imavov. I'm down. That's a good fight. Shara Magomedov and Michael Venom Page. That's either going to be a lot of fun or one of the worst fights ever. There's not a lot of middle ground on that one. Also on this card, Ikram Alaskarov and Andre Muniz. That's a good fight. Sergey Pavlovich trying to bounce back from a loss. Said Nurmagomedov is in action. Mateusz Gamrot and Rafael Fiziev is on this card. Why is that so far down on this list? This is not the bout order. We don't have the bout order for this one yet, but that's a really good fight, actually. So there's actually some stuff on that card in the UFC. And look, if they're getting paid by the Saudis, they'll have to put on something. And then UFC 312, February 9th in Sydney. We know a little bit of this one. I expect over the next couple of weeks we'll get the rest of this card announced. But main event, Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland 2. I didn't hate their first fight. Not my favorite fight ever, but I didn't hate it. I'm fine with it. Also, Zhang Weili and Tatiana Suarez. Okay. What else do we got there? I'm actually interested in Ray Saruya. He's fighting Stuart Nickley. Or is that Nickel? Sorry, Nickel. That is a double L on the end, not an I. Okay. Saruya, I actually think is a pretty good prospect, especially for Japanese MMA at flyweight. Yeah, so that's all kind of we've got for now. So that's got to get fleshed out a fair bit, but you know what? The first 4 events, 3 of them are solid, and 1 of them is just ass. That Dern and Hebos, that 11th card, that January 11th card, man. Headlined by Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Hebos, and it's all downhill after that. Apart from again Curtis and Kopylov, like it's a crappy card. There's just no 2 ways around that one. It is just bad. The other 3 though, yeah, those all kind of get thumbs ups for what they are. So That's a speculative thumbs up on UFC 312. We don't know enough of the rest of the card yet to be really enthusiastic, but moderate thumbs up for that one. So yeah, that's kind of what we got to look forward to, such as it is and such as we know right now. All right. Little over an hour, I'm going to check the old social medias and see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Nope. Nothing new there. So plugs. Let me hit a few of them for the upcoming stuff, if y'all will indulge me just a bit. So Monday, probably when you're listening to this, Damn You Hollywood for Craven the Hunter. Not looking, not feeling good about that one, for the record. Monday the 23rd will be a Damn You Hollywood for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and then Monday the 30th will be the Damn You Hollywood for Mufasa. Okay, I'm looking forward to Sonic 3. I got nothing for the other two. They look terrible. January 2nd will be the Damn You Hollywood 2024 year in review and our reveal of the 2025 schedule for Damn You Hollywood. So keep those in mind if you're interested in any and all of that. That should be a good time. See, and then we are back. I said the 5th. Yeah. So, okay, yeah. In the meantime, I will be covering WWE SmackDown. There will be one every Friday between now and then, I think. This one, the 20th, has been taped. 27th will probably be some kind of a year-end special. Be my hunch. Yeah, they taped this week's last week. So I'll be covering that, and then again, whatever they do on the 27th and the 3rd. Y'all know me, I will be there. I don't think I am set for any of the wrestling. I don't think there are any wrestling pay-per-views between now and like the Rumble. So see if I get tapped for that. I have done that. I've done that one before. Did I do that last year? I might have. No, I did it 2 years ago. Yeah, I might have done it last year. I don't remember. Um, I, there's a few of these that I'm perpetually on deck for a lot of things, and there's a few events this time of year, Survivor Series, the Rumble, that kind of thing, where family obligations and whatnot or work obligations interfere with other people's, and that's for most of these less of a concern for me. So I'm usually able and willing to step up and cover other events. So keep a lookout for stuff in the wrestling and MMA zones of 411mania.com. You can find me over there. And then, of course, all my movie and television podcasting over on the W2M network. So tune in for any and all of that. And yeah, that's it for this year, everybody, for the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. I will see you next year. Until then, stay safe out there. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And as always, continue to be well, be safe, and behave.